Hello, good afternoon. How's everyone doing this afternoon? This is fantastic. What a great turnout. There's, I think, almost 200 people in here to learn about water in the Coachella Valley today. It's wonderful to see you all. My name's TJ. I'm the program coordinator here at the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. I'll be brief, just a couple of reminders. If you have a cell phone with you, make sure you put that on silent or turn it off. Also, if you're interested in everything else we have going on at the library, it is a lot, especially right now. March is just packed full of great programming. Almost every day we have something. So be sure to pick up, we've got our new program guide out. You can pick that up in the back of the room. And you can also sign up for our email list as well, which we send out email reminders monthly, weekly, and even daily reminders about all of our major programming. So a lot going on right now. The relationship that we've had with Friends of the Desert Mountains over the past couple of years has been really great. It's one of the partnerships that we have, and it's one of the kind of programs that I really enjoy helping to facilitate and make happen, because they really are win-wins. Hopefully you'll learn a lot through the series that we've done with them and through the lecture that we have today, and it's the kind of programming that we know our patrons here like, and then hopefully it introduces some of the people that might not otherwise know about some of the great organizations that we have here in the Coachella Valley, to find out about those organizations, learn about their missions, and all the great work that they're doing. So if you have any questions about anything we're doing, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. You can just send an email to programming@ranchomiragelibrary.org. We always want to hear your ideas and anything else, feedback that you have. It's always fun with Friends of the Desert Mountains, and it is my great pleasure to welcome back one of their most excellent speakers who has been here before, and he does a great job. So help me welcome to the stage Mr. Oscar Ortiz.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing today? Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. I also want to say thank you to TJ and the staff here at the Rancho Mirage Library. Let's give them a round of applause for all the work they do for us. This is a great venue, and we really appreciate you all being here and filling up the area for us. So thank you again. I'm Oscar Ortiz. I'm the Deputy Director for Friends of the Desert Mountains. We're a nonprofit based in the Coachella Valley. We work on land conservation. We've helped conserve over 60,000 acres of land throughout the region over the past 38 years. We also promote hiking a lot. Our volunteers maintain over 300 miles of trails throughout the area so that our community can go out and enjoy our natural lands. And we also do a lot of environmental education with school groups, community groups, other organizations. So really enjoy having the ability to come out here and share some environmental education with you all. So today we're going to be talking about water in the Coachella Valley. We're going to be talking about where does our water come from, where does it go. We'll talk about some drought issues, environmental issues, and how we can help as a community. We'll also make it pretty interactive, so I'll be asking some questions of the crowd, and sometimes the light's in my eye, but I'll try to find you guys there. So first question I have for you all is, where does our water come from? Any takers in the crowd? Colorado River. Aquifer, and we import some from up north. And some comes from our mountains through the snowfall, rainfall, and other natural processes, right? That's correct. And then where is our water being used? Someone said golf courses. That's a popular answer. Our homes, different uses, right? We have all kinds of uses here in the growing Coachella Valley. So some of the things that we're going to look at is our water system, some of the sources we have. In blue, you'll see the natural sources, so our Whitewater River. We have our underground aquifer, and we have rainwater and snowfall that join us here. We also have new sources, which is our recycled water, and our All-American Canal that brings water from the Colorado River. Some of the outlets we have, natural outlets, our soil and our ground absorb a lot of water. Our aquifer also stores a lot of water underground. And then our Salton Sea, the lowest point of the valley, that's where all the leftover water ends up sometimes, right? And then we have some of the new uses, which is agriculture, drinking water, and business and residential use throughout our area. A unit of measurement that we'll want to remember for this lecture, 1 acre-foot. That's how water is commonly measured in the water industry. So 1 acre is about a football field wide. 1 acre-foot is a football field wide and about a foot deep. So just remember that one, 1 acre-foot. That'll help you here on the next slide when we look at the supply and demand of the Coachella Valley. And so here we'll see on the, try this out here. On the demand side, we see it's about half urban and half agriculture use. Urban does include that golf course use, which is about 120,000 acre-feet per year. It's a good amount of that water there. And then on the supply side, we have about half coming from our groundwater and about half coming from canal water. The little sliver up top of purple, that is our recycled water, about 14,000 acre-feet per year. Something to notice here, these are 2 different figures, one for 2021 and one for 2023. And if you look at the total demand, it's gone down by about 56,000 acre-feet per year. And so if you remember, in 2020, 2021, 2022, we had a really bad drought. And that's when a lot of measures were coming in, regulations. We had a pretty good scare there, and I think that's kind of held us back a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about this. So our Whitewater River, that's bringing down water from the San Gorgonio Mountains. That's snowmelt and rainfall. Also brings down water from the Colorado River Aqueduct. This is an exchange that happens with the LA area. And that allocation is determined by the state. And so they allocate depending on how much water there is throughout the state. So on good years, you'll get more water allocation. On drier years, you'll have a lot less. And so in 2022, a very bad drought year, we had only 5% allocation. We only got 3,000 acre-feet from the Colorado River Aqueduct. In 2023, we had a really good year of snowfall and rain throughout the state, and so we got 100% allocation, 62,000 acre-feet of water. And then more recently, last year, we had a 40% allocation, 24,000 acre-feet. Most of this water is used for filling our aquifer, and these are the ponds that you see out there next to the windmills. Has anybody seen those water ponds out there that are filtering water down? That's coming from that from the Whitewater River. We also have recycled water from our sewer system. Those figures there are from CVWD. They have a lot of really great tours of these facilities if you're ever interested. And this water is cleaned, the sewage that's cleaned up, purified, and then used in landscaping. A lot of it's used in our local golf courses, and we do produce 14,000 acre-feet per year. One thing to remember is be careful what you flush. A lot of things that you buy will say they're flushable, especially like those wet wipes. They usually are not, and they cause a lot of issues for these systems, a lot of expensive maintenance, and so please be careful. Anything you flush, usually just toilet paper, human waste, and that's about it. Everything else should go in the trash to make it easier for our water workers there. Here in purple, you'll see throughout the Coachella Valley different sites that are using that recycled water for their landscaping. And you'll see that most of those are a lot of our gated communities or golf courses, places that use really heavy water. So our water districts have concentrated on looking for the heaviest users of canal water and transferring them over to recycled water. Any questions before we move forward? One here.
We had a recent speaker here who claimed that most of the water that ends up in the percolation ponds actually evaporates and very little of it goes into the aquifer.
Sure. He said one of the recent speakers mentioned that some of the percolation ponds, they have a high amount of evaporation, so that most of the water will evaporate. I have not heard that. I'd be pretty surprised, but again, not too sure. Sorry. Anybody else? Okay, we'll keep going. Where's the wastewater treatment? There's a few. There's one in Indio Valley Sanitary District. I know there's one in Palm Desert as well. I believe there's one more, and I'm not sure where that location is. Sorry? Palm Springs. Okay, I was guessing that, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, thank you. Now we'll move on to our Coachella Valley aquifer. And so this is our underground water storage system This is where our drinking water, residential water, business water gets pumped out from underground. And so this water is stored between rocks and soil and pumped out using water pumps. And so you'll see in this figure here where we have those percolation ponds here on the side, and the water's then going down underwater and then comes up and gets pumped up for these different uses here. Sometimes I like to think of it, because some people think like it's an underground lake, right? But it's more like I think of it as a bathtub that's full of rocks and sediments and all these things filled in, and in between all those rocks is water, and that's where we're pumping out of. The aquifer is estimated to hold about 39 million acre feet of water. It's constantly used and refilled with Colorado River water. Since 1973, we've refilled about 2 million acre feet of water into our aquifer. A little bit of history on the Salton Sea. Currently, it's about 4.3 million acre feet of water. For thousands of years, the Colorado River would fill up ancient Lake Cahuilla. And so we'll see here, there is this silt buildup area where it would change direction. The Colorado River would go from emptying out to the Sea of Cortez, and then it would switch directions and go to ancient Lake Cahuilla, and it would switch back and forth over thousands of years, right? So the water would come up all the way to the water lines we see now in the Coachella Valley. So if you drive around the valley, we always see those water lines, right? And so that's where the water used to come up to, and it used to come up all the way up to the La Quinta Cove. And this was a natural resource for the Cahuilla here, our native community, and it brought in a lot of fish and other natural resources, and we still see a lot of evidence of that activity a lot near those shorelines, near the edges of those mountains. So you'll find something like the fish traps that are out there that were used to gather fish. In 1873, there was levees built on the Colorado River, preventing flows to the Salton Sea. At this time, there was commercial uses at the Salton Sea, like salt mining. In 1905, those levees break, and the sea begins to fill for, I think it was about 2 years, and the Salton Sea fills up pretty high at that time. As colonization continues, the construction of the Pacific Railroad continues. You see more construction and more agriculture, and you have a higher and higher demand for water. At that time, some of the things we saw was that this water supplies in our aquifer were going down. So here there used to be, artesian wells, which are wells that naturally spring up out of the ground, and they stopped seeing that kind of activity, and so they knew that we were depleting the water resources underground. And so that led to the All-American Canal that was going to bring in more water from the Colorado River to keep up with this growing development of the Coachella Valley. It now brings in about 300,000 acre feet to the Coachella Valley. Water from this canal is mostly used for irrigation in the Imperial Valley and in the Coachella Valley, also used for that replenishment, as we mentioned. And from this irrigation that's happening in the Imperial Valley and Coachella Valley, a lot of that runoff is what ends up filling our Salton Sea. Here are some other pictures of those canals, bringing that water from the Colorado River. And these are some of those percolation ponds that are used to fill up our aquifer. So the water will sit there, filter through the sand, and as it moves through the sand, it actually gets cleaned up. And by the time it gets to our aquifer, it's pretty clean there. I believe, and I'm just going off of memory here, I think somebody told me it was 1 foot every 3 hours, or 3 hours every 1 foot. There was a ratio between 1 and 3 there. So I'm not too sure. But it is kind of slow. It is kind of slow. Does the All-American Canal flow downhill? Yes, I believe so. Yes. This is one of the pipes here that's bringing in water to those percolation ponds. There's one in Palm Desert. There's one, I believe there's another one in the La Quinta area, and then the ones next to the windmills as well. Anybody, any check here? Palm Springs? There you go. Palm Springs as well. Thank you. You want to come up? No, I'm just kidding. So as we're diverting water from these systems, the Whitewater River and the Colorado River, what are some of the consequences to our environment that you all think are happening to these systems? Let's see. Any hands? Raise your hand. Nobody? All right. Yes. Wildlife impacts. We definitely see a lot of wildlife impacts. Areas that used to have a lot of water now are drying up, right? And so we'll look at some of those consequences here. There's some effects on the Colorado River Delta because there's so much less water going to the Sea of Cortez that we know that there's also less nutrients going out to the Sea of Cortez, which is affecting the wildlife there. There's also 15 dams built just on the main stem of the Colorado River. There's even more on the offshoots, smaller rivers that come out of there. And so we're seeing drier conditions in natural habitats and habitat loss, and also the interruption of those dams, which we know causes some environmental damage there. We also have the drying up of the Salton Sea, which is exposing our toxic lake bed. So for decades, fertilizers and pesticides and industrial waste have contaminated this lake. And now that as the water evaporates, those salts and pollutants are concentrating even more and more. We're also seeing a change in biology in there with different types of bacterial growth that are happening. And these effects are causing dust that is negatively impacting the health of the communities around there. And more recently, UC Riverside has been studying the sea breeze that comes out of there. And they're finding some contaminants in the sea breeze that also could very likely have negative impacts on the health of those residents. And so if you're able to go to any of their lectures at UC Riverside here locally in Palm Desert, they have some great information on these health impacts that are going on. Current plans at the Salton Sea, so as the lake bed is drying up and being exposed and our salt and pollutants are concentrating, we're expecting about 60,000 acres of lake bed to be exposed by 2028. Currently, they're executing the 10-year management plan, and that plan will cover about 30,000 acres of that exposed lake bed with new habitat projects or restoration projects. But again, that's about half of what we're expecting to be exposed by 2028. These are some calculations, so I'm going to show you kind of like some napkin calculations based on the water cuts that we've been seeing, and then we'll look at the actual impacts that we're seeing at the Salton Sea. And so in 2003, there was a quantification settlement agreement where water started being transferred to San Diego. Before that, there was a pretty good balance between the inflows and the evaporation rate of the Salton Sea. So we saw a pretty steady level there. But then you see there's no real water deficit. It's kind of evened out. But after that deal goes through, we have 303,000 acre feet of water per year that are being transferred to the San Diego region instead of to agricultural uses and other uses here in the Coachella Valley and Imperial Valley. And so at that point, we're seeing that 300,000 acre feet reduction, right? So now we're losing a little bit of water there in that system. And again, if you look at it, the golf courses, right, 120,000 acre feet per year, we could have maybe slowed down that rate a little bit, right, if we were using our water a little bit more responsibly. Now in 2023, we had a huge water shortage in the early 2020s, and there had to be a deal that was made between IID and the Bureau of Reclamation, and that actually reduced our inflows even more. And so that reduced our water by 250,000 acre feet, mostly to agricultural areas in the Imperial Valley, and that was in exchange for $250 million in federal funding, and that cut was every year for 3 years. And so now we've built up that deficit to about 550,000 acre feet per year of water coming to the region. And now we'll look more closely at the Salton Sea and what we see happening. And you'll see here, one of the numbers that's changing the highest is the Imperial Valley number, which is 900, 880, 80, and it goes down to 840 here in 2023, right? Here on the bottom, you'll see the elevation of water at the Salton Sea, and you'll see that it's been going down steadily since the year 2000. And so we know, again, in 2003 is when we started transferring that water to San Diego area, and that's when we see the dip start coming. And so currently, as we mentioned earlier, we're at 4.3 million acre feet of water. It's about 306 square miles in area, the Salton Sea, but we have seen that 13-foot loss in volume since 2003. We've also seen a lot of reductions in bird species and many of the fish species in the area. We do have 14,000 acres of those mitigation projects in progress, trying to rebuild those habitats and keep the dust suppressed in that area. One of the issues that still is ongoing is that we still have contaminated runoff and the concentration of salt and pollutions at the sea because we don't have any extra sources of water coming in. So some of the things that we would like to see at the Salton Sea are more clean water flows into the sea to maintain the health of that water system and the health of our communities. And we think this can be done by reducing our water use, reducing fertilizers, pesticides, and other contaminants going to the sea, and possibly increasing or incentivizing clean agriculture in the area to keep industries going, but also to provide those clean water flows to our Salton Sea. Any questions before we move on? Yes.
So you said that in exchange for giving San Diego more water, we got, I guess, the Coachella Valley, $250 million for what?
That was, so the question was, we got an exchange for the 250,000 acre feet of water that we're cutting since 2023. There was a $250 million exchange, and that went to IID. I believe some of it was used to pay the farmers that were following the land because they were not going to be producing. I know some of that went there. I don't know the details of where all that money went. I have been trying to find out, though. Maybe next year we'll have that. Yeah. Yeah, I think I do remember the headlines at least showed that some of that would be used for Salton Sea restoration. But I know some of it is also going to have to go to pay the farmers who are not growing those crops. Any other questions? Yes?
Who made that 2003 quantification settlement in which we started losing so much water?
Who made the agreement for 2003?
Was that a state?
I believe it was federal and also the Imperial Irrigation District. Yes, am I right there? Nice. Check. You have a fact checker this time. It's awesome. Oh, sorry, question. There you go. How are the commercial operations at the Salton Sea, like lithium and battery, going to affect our water supply? I believe one of the lawsuits that came in recently was because the environmental impact report for one of those facilities did not take into account how much water would be used and how that would impact the area. And so I think that's one of the things that at least the community is being a little bit stronger in demanding, is seeing what water use is going to be there and how is it going to impact our current struggle for supply of water. Yes, because yes, I agree. It's tough questions there. Does anybody recognize this picture? It's about Lake Mead 2 years ago in 2022, right? And so we'll talk about Lake Mead. This is during a very severe drought here in our community. Lake Mead's America's largest reservoir. It holds water from the Colorado River for disbursement. That's why it's very important to our community. If there's no water in Lake Mead, and there's no water coming down the Colorado River. And so in summer of 2022, it was at the lowest level since being filled in 1937, and that was 27% capacity. And at that time, I don't know if you all remember, but there was headlines coming up about sunken boats and bodies resurfacing around the Las Vegas area. Yeah, some people were not following the laws back then. I don't know. And so here at Lake Mead, there's a tier system where when you reach a certain tier, you have to have cuts to different states. So different states have agreed to take different cuts at the different tier levels. And you see here that in 2024, Lake Mead is at the tier 1 shortage, which means the Central Arizona project got a cut of 400,000 acre feet of water, as you see there on the side. And so here in 2020, we'll show the numbers for Lake Mead. and you'll see that we are above any of those tier shortages. So you're at 1075, you're above 1075, and there's no cuts to our water there. In 2021, we start dipping below 1075, and you reach the tier 1 shortage, and you start having some of those cuts to certain states. 2022, where we saw that picture, we're down at tier 2, and you're starting to have more aggressive cuts to the states, and people are having to cut back even more water use. 2023, luckily, we start seeing some more rainfall, some more snowfall, and we start seeing that level come back up. 2024, the green line there, you'll see that it's kind of regular again. It starts off good in the winter, drops down a bit in the fall. And 2025, we're starting again in tier 1. It's important to note here that we're starting at the same place that we started in 2022. And so depending on how we do this year, it'll determine whether we're going to go back to that tier 2 and see those drops in water levels, or if we're going to be responsible and keep a good steady level. So every year is important for us. Any questions there? One back there. So the question is, that a lot of times we'll hear that we have those 39 million acre feet of water underground, right? And that we have enough water here for a very long time. And how does that play into, how do the shortages that we're seeing here play into the fact that we are still a growing community, right? And how are we going to supply all this water? Is there really enough in the aquifer? Is there really enough coming from the Colorado River? To me, I always think about, we need water to grow as our community, but our natural environment also needs water, right? And so even though we'll talk a little bit about this later, we're actually seeing an increase in levels in our aquifer. Our aquifer levels are going up, but that's not what we're seeing in our natural environment, right? And so I think that is kind of, we can keep our water levels good underground, but if we're not taking care of the Salton Sea, then we could have some really negative impacts. We are already having a lot of negative impacts to the health of our communities out here, right? And so I think even if we have that big reservoir, we need to keep that full, but we also need to keep reducing our water use, finding new ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about strategies to do that. I do think, at some level, it's the government, our local leaders, government officials who are making these decisions on what is allowed and what is not allowed. So at some point, it ends up at that higher level that those decisions are being made. But again, advocacy from our community always helps to shift those goals and those strategies. So I definitely encourage you all to stay involved and keep the communication going with all those leaders who are making these decisions here for our community. Hope that answers your question. Thank you. This is a good figure I found for groundwater levels in our aquifer since 1970. And so you'll see here, if we're just imagining in 1970 we're starting off at 0, we'll see that over the years we started off up here, we're going pretty steady, and then we just start dipping down, right? And if you look down here, 2009 is when that dip starts coming back up. Does anybody know what happened in 2009? The Delta Reform Act passed. Possibly. I'm not sure how much that impacted this one as directly as what I'm going to show you right now. So one of the things that happened here was the replenishment facilities. And so we start that groundwater replenishment, a heavier side of groundwater replenishment, and we see it. This is one of our local wells here. And we see that number again, 2009, start coming back up. But again, that's Colorado River water, right?
I thought you said that came in from Whitewater. That's State Water Project water.
It comes in from Whitewater and from the Colorado River. Yes. Two different sources, but two different sources of replenishment. Yes. Here you'll see that this is kind of our groundwater balance, so how much is being taken out and how much is going into our aquifer every year. These are the numbers for 2021, and you'll see that on the left hand here we see the inflows, which is the groundwater replenishment coming from our two different sources here, and then we have our return flows from agriculture, golf courses, and other uses. At the bottom we have that natural runoff infiltrating into our aquifer. On the right hand, we see the outflows, which is mostly just groundwater pumping, right, for all of our different uses here in the valley, and a little bit of net drain to the Salton Sea, and small little slivers of evaporation loss up at top. But if you look at that top number there, it's about 6,000 acre feet per year. And then I'll show you the 2023 number. So 2 years later, we actually have a lot more, 129,000 acre feet of water that we replenished. So that was a net positive that we saw into our aquifer. So those are the numbers that are keeping that level rising up in our aquifer. We also have here, you see a lot more natural runoff in that year because we didn't have a drought that year. So that also helped us out quite a bit. So as somebody mentioned earlier, you know, we are seeing our aquifer levels going up. We're taking good care of that aquifer and getting it back to natural levels, but we're still seeing the environmental impacts in the Colorado River, Lake Mead, other natural areas in our communities. So what are some other ways that we can conserve water that we haven't maybe done yet? Any ideas? Yes.
I have to compliment this area because when you go out to a restaurant, you're asked if you like a glass of water. In a lot of places, bring you a pitcher and keep filling your water up whether you drink it or not. And that's such a simple solution, and at least in this area,
Gotcha.
having that kind of service.
So we have a compliment about the restaurants and how they're careful about, a little bit more careful now about their water use when they're handing out water to the customers. That is one good way. Another one?
Has anybody offered farmers incentive to grow less water-intensive crops? I mean, growing alfalfa and cotton in the desert, they're very water-intensive.
Incentives for growing less water-intensive crops. That would be a good one. I'm not sure if that's actually been done. I know those conversations are definitely happening. As you mentioned, alfalfa is a very heavy water use in the Imperial Valley. And I think that may be some of the people that we're following now with those recent cuts. Others, yes.
Are developers of large-scale housing developments required to take any mitigation or conservation methods?
Are large-scale developments required to have mitigation efforts? It depends on the city. It depends on the planning commission. That's going to be more on the local government side. I don't know if there's any strong state regulations on that at the moment or any others. Yes. Any other questions? Back there. Restrictions on residential use, specifically for lawns, you're saying? Yes, that has sometimes come from the state as well, right? Those requirements of less watering and certain days that you can water or not water. It's definitely something that we've seen before. Yes? That is a really good point, that there's a lot of water that goes into making clothes. And if you buy more clothes, you're using a lot more water, right? We don't really think about it, but it's true. And actually, I'll show you a number later that shows that some shirts can take up to 2,700 liters of water when you take into account the crops that are grown, the dyeing, the manufacturing, shipping, and all that, right? So it adds up pretty good, definitely. And honestly, just reducing our consumption in general, right, of things that aren't completely necessary, definitely. Anyone else? Yes.
Since half the water use is by farmers, is there any incentive to move away from the tapping aquifers and instead using Colorado River and other water?
Is there any incentives for farmers to use canal water instead of, instead of groundwater?
Instead of tapping the aquifer.
instead of tapping the aquifer. I believe most of the agriculture is coming from Colorado River water at the moment. Most of it, yes. And I think whoever's not on there, there is that effort to get the highest water users on canal water instead of the groundwater, definitely. Anyone else? All right, let's check out what we have here. Another one back here? Yes. Are there any new moves for more efficient irrigation systems? Yes, and actually on this next slide, the first one I have is agriculture. Drip irrigation has drastically reduced our water use here in the area because most of it used to be flood irrigation. And so over the past couple of decades, we have seen a lot more drip irrigation that has reduced a lot of that water use. There's still more that can be done, right? And especially encouraging more people to use those water efficient systems. There's also greenhouse technologies that are being studied that could possibly reuse the same water, contain it, and reuse the water. There's also at home, as you mentioned, different appliances use less water. Lawns are an extremely heavy water use for our community, and so we do encourage people planting native plants. We actually are working on a native planting guide, and so we'll be having that in the next couple of weeks at a lot of our events. A little booklet that's used to teach our community which plants you can use, which plants are native, their different properties, what pollinators they're good for, and so you could do some really great things with native plants in your homes. I've been experimenting with that in my backyard over the past couple of years, growing different native plants. There's one that Deli, one of our coworkers, showed me. It's the creosote plant, and that's actually a home species for over 100 native species here in the region. And so every morning I come out and there's at least 10 or 20 bees on that plant. And so it's really nice. And hummingbirds like that one as well. The tuberosa plant here, that's a plant, it's named after the hummingbird because the hummingbird loves that plant. So I always encourage people, instead of using the hummingbird feeders, plant some tuberosas and they'll come by and visit you every day. Yeah, it's a lot of great things that we can do. Biodegradable products are also extremely important, something that I've also been trying to incorporate into my lifestyle so that we have less of those microplastics and other contaminants that are going into our water systems, and so that we can keep our water systems clean. Advocacy, as we mentioned, staying connected with local leaders and people who are in charge of these huge decisions about our water is going to always be important. Products and packaging, somebody mentioned clothing, and we see that 2,700 liters of water to make a shirt, right? 2.5 gallons of water to refine 1 gallon of gasoline. And so even reducing our gasoline use not only reduces our fossil fuel emissions, but it also saves us water. And then always reducing, reusing, and recycling when we can to, again, reduce our consumption of new materials and reduce our water use overall. Now, we also mentioned that our wildlife is being impacted, right, by these water shortages in our natural lands. So what are some other ways that we can help our local wildlife survive during these hard times? Any ideas? Put out water in the summer for animals? Yeah, actually, and we see that being done at a bigger level with the bighorn sheep. And that's one of the ways that the numbers have come back up, right? They have little springs that they've put up around areas where bighorn sheep are found so that they have consistent water. Because if you remember, they were all coming down to the La Quinta area, going through the golf courses and everything, looking for water because it was getting so dry out there, right? So now there's some fences that have been put up, but also water sources that have been put out there for those bighorn sheep. Yes, definitely. Anyone else? How do we help our wildlife? All right, I'll give you guys some. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes, wildlife corridors. We've seen that coming up more recently, right? Where there's huge freeways and things like that where animals can pass through, providing some kind of corridor for those animals to pass. I actually think of the native planting as a wildlife corridor as well, right? You see, if you look at an aerial picture of the Coachella Valley from 100 years ago to now, it's a completely different landscape. And for all these different animals that are trying to make it through our desert, giving them a place to stop and get food, on the native plants that they recognize is a great way to help build back those migration corridors through our Coachella Valley and provide more habitat for our native species here. One thing we do really encourage people is to learn about our local wildlife. The more we understand how they live and what they do, the better that we can help them continue to survive here in our area. We want to understand where they live, what do they eat, what are their threats. The desert tortoise is one of our endangered species here, and one of the things that we teach our community is that one of the biggest, does anybody know some of the threats against the desert tortoise? Ravens, somebody said it, ravens. Because ravens will find the baby desert tortoise who still has a soft shell and get through that shell. And so what can we do to reduce the amount of ravens? We can make sure that our trash is completely covered, safely covered, not open, right? We can reduce the amount of litter that we have out in our desert so that the ravens don't get to it. So in general, keeping our trash put away and not littering will help us with the raven issue and help us keep our desert tortoise around for a longer time. Native planting, as we mentioned, bringing that conservation effort not only to our deserts and to our mountains, but into our neighborhoods, rebuilding the habitat through native planting, reducing our water use through native planting, and even providing urban greening benefits with those new trees, like the mesquites, right? There used to be mesquite groves all over the Coachella Valley here, so rebuilding that's one of our goals. Preserving habitats is also really important. Responsible hiking and responsible camping. If you missed our last lecture, we did a Hiking 101 lecture. It's available on Rancho Mirage's YouTube channel. And off-roading as well, only off-roading in designated areas, and also making sure we're not doing any illegal dumping. We still manage about 18,000 acres of natural lands out in the Coachella Valley, and we have a lot of illegal dumping. Tons of it. And so that's one of the things that we work on with our volunteers, and we go out and get grants to go and clean up those lands and make sure it's nice and clean for our desert tortoise there. Now, what about environmental careers? What careers would you choose if you wanted to help our environment? Any takers here? Yes. Teachers can teach our kids simple life lessons on how to conserve more water, definitely. Our teachers play a big impact in how our kids understand our natural environment, so I think that's a really good one. Teachers, definitely. Anybody else? Careers where you can impact? Yes? Politics from local on up. Definitely need good leaders in our elected positions to make good decisions for our environment and for our communities. Good point there. Yes? Land usage and management. Yes, definitely. And we do have some people that help us on our land acquisition, so even real estate, people in the real estate industry can help in the environmental cause, for sure. Anybody else? Yes. Definitely, she mentioned that you have someone in this picture, somebody who's retired, and they're teaching the younger generation something about the environment, right? And so having those community scientists going out and helping our community learn more and more about our environment and how to take care of it's definitely important. Some of the ones I have here, science and math teachers, the first one I have. Professors, environmental educators, people who can break down these complex systems into easier, bite-sized things that our kids or community members can understand. It's definitely important. Environmental scientists, testing for water quality, monitoring climate change impacts here in the Coachella Valley. We have some great environmental scientists at UC Riverside that help us out in some of our programs. And then people who study and protect our endangered species are also extremely important. Yes, question. Journalists, yes, definitely local journalism, right? Yep, and we have some great stories coming out these days about the Salton Sea, so I'm really proud of the journalism efforts that some of our organizations have done out here to raise the concerns here in our community. Another one. Land trusts? Ooh, that's an interesting one. Yes, we have one of them that we have Mojave Desert Land Trust, right, out in Joshua Tree, and they do a really good job. They actually have a native seed bank that they're doing as well, and they're a great partner of ours as well. They helped us on our native planting guide too, so definitely land trusts. One more here.
What about agriculture and animal husbandry? I mean, their education is more environmentally sound
Hmm.
because they use a lot of the resources
Yes.
for habitat.
Agriculture and animal husbandry is what you called it? Yes, definitely very important. We're actually talking about earlier, we would like to see the clean agriculture on the Salton Sea, right? But we were thinking, who do we know that works in regenerative agriculture, right? That's working on those kind of issues. Who are the smartest people that we can find that could maybe help us? Because those are really hard soils to deal with too around the Salton Sea, right? In some of those areas, the heavy water use comes from flooding the salts back down. And so that it's a strategy, it works, but it's also very costly in terms of water supply. So are there different ways that we can go about it and study new agricultural methods to help our environment? Definitely a good point. Businesses also could be a great environmental career, right? Building sustainable products, sustainable foods, sustainable clothing, sustainable agriculture as well. And then somebody mentioned government, city councils, county supervisors, state legislators, DC, U.S. Congress, Senate, all those people play a huge role in the way that our environment is handled and how our natural resources are handled through our communities. And so that's just a couple, but there's plenty more opportunities for us to go out there and have a environmentally positive career in our community. And that's all I have. I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for helping us protect our environment here. Thank you. Thanks. All right. Good. Thank you.